So now I'm back on my roadcaster, and I just did an episode with all plugins because I don't think I've ever done that. I don't think I've ever done an episode with all plugins. I'm always going back and forth between my uh I'm always going back and forth between my roadcaster and my uh 528. So I don't think I've ever done uh the whole uh just my SM7DB type thing. So that's pretty interesting. It was uh I guess it definitely gave me an insight on what it would sound like if I went through my microphone with just with only plugins. So and I had found a good setting, and that was with my Rodecaster Pro 2. That was a good thing. I finally figured that out, and I got my EQ, got that all figured out. The only thing I thought about when I was walking, because I listened to it in my car, and it sounded a little bit light. So then I thought about it, and I said, "Well, hang on. I'm using two high pass filters. I'm using a high pass filter on my Rodecaster, and then I'm using another high pass filter on my on the on TDR Nova. So that's why it was sounding really light. I mean, don't get me wrong; it sounded really, really good. Don't get me wrong. It sounded really good. I mean, really good, really clean, really clear. It sounded really nice. So that was definitely a good thing. I've been fighting this sound stuff for quite some time, and I'm getting to almost 100 episodes on my other podcast. So I figured, it was time to say, you know what, by 100 episodes, at least, and this is my thinking. This is nothing against anybody else. For me, I think by my imaginary uh, critics, I think that by 100 episodes, you should have an idea of where you should be in a position of a stable, somewhat stable sound. Those 100 episodes, that's fine. They should, if you have to, they should show progression. Some are bad, some are good, whatever. And listeners should be able to go through and see that process in those 100 episodes. But I think after you reach 100 episodes, that's when your sound should get to a point to where, okay, now you've reached, you climb that hill, now you can not now you can level out, and now you're giving your viewers, or listeners, should I say, now you're giving your listeners a sound that they can expect on a regular basis, and they can get used to, because at that point, now you've graduated to followers who continue to follow your podcast, and they're not just there because of a couple episodes. Now they're there to see how long you can last, to see how persistent you are, because you put out content over and over and over again, and you passed their first test, I think. And now they're trying to say, okay, now the second step, there's persistency. He's made it to, 100 episodes. Okay, now let's try, Now let's try 300 episodes. Okay, now let's try 500 episodes. And then just on and on and on and on and on. So you're constantly doing it for the listeners, and that's the whole point of a podcast is to me, I think the whole point of a podcast is to get out what what's on what you're thinking about and what's on your mind and what you want to talk about and what you want people to hear and understand and relate to. And I think that's why podcasts are really important. I believe that I think some people, the biggest thing that I hear when people are doing podcasts is they look at it like, what am I going to say? Or, another one is, you're on a podcast, you're talking to yourself. No, you're getting thoughts out for listeners to relate to. You can call it talking to yourself, whatever. You have to be, to me, you have to be able to talk to yourself because otherwise, it's a dead conversation. You have to be able to you have to be able to talk when nobody's listening. That's the most important part. Because when you record the episode, nobody's listening. So therefore, you have to be able to get to that point to where, where you can have an audience and you can just sit up and talk and talk and talk. And you're so lost in your own thoughts that, you're not paying attention to whether anybody is listening or not. They're just enjoying your mindset on that particular subject. And some people may have some questions and you may have some interaction and good and bad. There's always going to be somebody that's going to be against what you're saying. Somebody that may have questions. Somebody that feels like you're a know-it-all and what you said may not be right or whatever, and that kind of thing. So and that's fine. That's definitely fine because everybody has a right to their opinion, and that's not a bad thing. It's not something that I don't think it's something that I don't think it's a bad thing. It creates a conversation. It creates a good conversation, or if you want me to say the fancy word, it creates a good dialogue between you and those people, to where they can voice their mindset and you can voice your mindset, and you all can come to a medium and understand each other's point of view. And that's important because, you want to understand where other people are coming from. You want to, nobody wants to hear somebody who what they think is it. You want somebody that can understand everybody else's point of view. You may be right or wrong, but you want somebody that can understand other people's point of view, and that's the important part. So, it really helps. It really does. It's important, and it's something that you have to. It's something that you have to. It's something that you have to be aware of because that's part of the journey that you're on. Because podcasting is a journey. Podcasting is something that I want to be doing when I retire. Podcasting is something that I want to. I'm anxious to get home to do episodes. I'm anxious to get episodes out every day. I'm anxious to get a great sound. So podcasting is something that I'm very heavily invested in. I'm not invested to the point to where it's like a make or break type of situation, But I am heavily invested uh, in podcasting and in equipment and in DAWs and in plugins and all that kind of stuff. But the point is, you 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 have to get, if you want to be like the best, then you have to get the equipment that the best have. You can't be running around here with a USB mic that's catching everything, catching mosquitoes flying around, and you just can't do it. Um, unless, don't get me wrong, because there are a lot of people out here with uh um uh USB mics and everything. I started off on one. But you can have a USB mic, and there's tons of software that you can get that has noise gates and all that kind of stuff. And Audacity, they have a lot of free plugins also that you can get that will get you to the point you're trying to get to. So it's just persistence, man. It's just persistence. If you don't have persistence, I don't think that you will make it in anything. But if you're persistent, you'll make it in anything. Anything you want to do, you'll make it because you're persistent, and that's what's important. But want to get an episode out. I don't know. I love getting episodes out. Love doing them. So here's another episode. This one is done back with my Rodecaster Pro 2. And when I run it through my chain this time, I took the high pass filter off of my preset in TDR Nova. I just took the high pass filter off. Well, I moved it. I moved it over so far that it's no longer my waveform. It's not catching anything, so it's useless, but it's still there. I mean, you can still put them at like 30, so it'll catch like nothing that you'll ever hear. So, but that's it. I just wanted to get that out, and hey.